Let's get the perspective from Israel now and speak to Dan Perry, who's an Israeli affairs analyst and the former chair of the Foreign Press Association in Israel. He's joining us from Tel Aviv. Dan, good to have you back on Al Jazeera. So Hamas there is saying that they're reviewing the ceasefire proposal, which President Trump has said Israel has agreed to. First of all, do you have a clear understanding as to what exactly this proposal is that Israel has agreed to?
I have a clear understanding that what we know is not clear. Basically, it's a proposal to begin a stage of talks. And in those talks, as far as I can tell, there's no agreement yet on on what appear to be the bedrock position of both sides. Now, there are a lot of reports of optimism, and there is a sense that the momentum created by Israel's success in the war with Iran might enable political cover or psychological space for some sort of movement. Also, it would appear that Hamas, to a degree, has been shorn of its support from Iran, because the sense is that Iran might be less proactive in the coming months and years in supporting its proxies around the region. So, who knows?
Right.
Maybe behind the scenes, a deal is actually being pulled together that would involve the essential compromises on both sides. And I think what that needs to be is Israel more or less accepting the Palestinian Authority as the brand that goes into Gaza, and Hamas accepting some form of disarmament.
What potential common ground might actually exist between Israel and Hamas right now? And is there a realistic scenario, you think, where both sides can claim partial success from a negotiated ceasefire?
There is not a lot of common ground between Israel and Hamas, given their public positions. A lot depends on the degree to which Hamas cares about the people of Gaza. Because I think in the end, there's a binary choice. There's one way to end this war where Hamas more or less stays degraded and the strip much demolished, and the people impoverished, but they stay. And, you know, Israel hopes that they learn their lesson, something of that nature. But not much aid goes in, and the misery continues. Scenario two is if Hamas disarms, I think an enormous amount of regional, global, and Israeli aid goes in. The Palestinian Authority, somehow improved and reformed and maybe to a degree rebranded, takes over. And the strip is really rebuilt. And it's rebuilt from a position of such determination by the world to come out of this catastrophe with something positive, that good things will come for the people of Gaza.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said there will be no Hamas in a post-war Gaza. From your understanding, who exactly does he mean by Hamas? What does he mean by that? Is it limited to military leadership, the political wings of Hamas, civil affiliates of Hamas, or anyone really that's ideologically aligned with Hamas? What does he mean by Hamas cannot stay?
Well, I'm not a Netanyahu whisperer, nor have I powers of telepathy. But Netanyahu, for all the problems that attach to him, is not stupid. And he knows that to a degree, Hamas, as a factor in public opinion, the ideology of Hamas, jihadism in opposition to Israel's existence, is not going to disappear. What they are serious about, where they're done, I think, playing games, is with allowing Hamas as a militia that exists outside of the control of the recognized government. And in this case, it would have to be some version of the Palestinian Authority. They're done with that. So Hamas, as a militia, has to go. Whether they would really insist that no political party called Hamas run in elections, you know, probably to a degree. But they can't control it because they can just rename it. So the militia, the armed militia, is the issue here. And, you know, I think the time has come to focus on the essence. Hamas is an armed militia living in parallel with some other civilian authority, the way occurred in Lebanon with Hezbollah for decades, I think is no longer acceptable to Israel. It shouldn't be acceptable to the PA or to the Arab League. And from comments and statements I hear from those quarters, I believe it is not. That is a game which I think is over.
So do you think that, and let me try and phrase this right, do you think that Israel is not intent on eliminating anyone who they might see as ideologically allied to Hamas?
I can't speak for Israel, but my assessment, based on some knowledge, is that if Hamas agrees to disarm and really does disarm, then that is the key that unlocks the door to a resolution in Gaza that it's hard to say is good given the degree of cataclysm. But that takes us to a better place. That is the solution.
Okay, let me ask you one more.
If I was the Arab League, I focus on that.
Let me ask you one more question about what's happening within Israel. What's the level of public understanding or support inside Israel for Netanyahu's ceasefire conditions? And are they seen as achievable or more rhetorical and aimed at international audiences?
Well, to the degree that Hamas has some leverage, if they want to exercise leverage and they want to see this go on, they might have some there because the public does want the war to be over. They do. But on the other hand, Netanyahu's coalition is rock solid. It can rule for another year and a half before elections. And he's a clever politician. He knows how to play with that. So even though the public wants the war over and probably would accept the war being over with Hamas staying in power, and that's just it, I think Netanyahu will stick to this condition of disarming. And if you ask the Israeli people, of course they want Hamas to disarm. Obviously, they just also want to end the war. And I think the people who want to end the war while accepting Hamas having not disarmed, are simply assuming that Hamas has essentially terrorism and jihad in its DNA, and they will give Israel another excuse to go back after them in a month or a year or whatever, and there will be another war. That is not a great scenario for anyone. Okay. If I'm a human being who hopes for good things for all sides, Hamas really must disarm.
Dan Perry, thank you so much for bringing us a view there from Israel. Dan Perry joining us from Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
Well, let's get the view from Israel now and speak to Dan Perry, who's an Israeli affairs analyst and a former chair of the Foreign Press Association in Israel. Dan is joining us from Tel Aviv. Good to have you on again, Dan. So the Palestinians, Hamas says it's reviewing this ceasefire proposal, which Donald Trump, the U.S. president, has said Israel has agreed to. But is it clear to you what exactly they've agreed to? What conditions are in place for the ceasefire?
This appears to be another multi-phase ceasefire that doesn't really include a guarantee to end the war from the beginning. What I'm understanding, and this is really based on reports and leaks and a few conversations, is that it would be a 60-day pause in the fighting, during which 10 of the 20 hostages believed to be alive would be released, and Israel would do no military action during that time and would pull back from some of the positions. The idea is that there would be good faith talks this time on actually ending the war, and Hamas is holding on to 10 hostages so it doesn't lose that leverage. What that would look like and what good faith would look like really remains to be seen, because my assessment is that Israel will insist on a full Hamas disarmament, and also that Israel will come under pressure to allow the PA to be the sort of umbrella brand under which Gaza is governed, presumably with the help of Arab countries. Neither of those things have been agreed to, respectively, by Hamas or Israel.
These conditions for a ceasefire are similar to what's been presented before. So what's different, do you think? Is there a level of public support and understanding in Israel right now that would see this happen? Is there more push for a ceasefire within Israel?
A number of things are different. First of all, it's been 21 months, and Israel's idea that it can completely crush Hamas militarily without also killing the hostages in the process, that has proven impossible, or at least extremely difficult, as many people predicted from the beginning. So it's the time that has gone on has created such opposition in Israel to prolonging the war, and willingness among the Israeli public to end the war, even if in one way or another Hamas remains in Gaza, that this gives Netanyahu some political cover for that, and also creates pressure. The other thing, presumably Hamas is not completely inhuman, and maybe they care a little bit about the damage being done to civilians in Gaza. Maybe that at some point reaches a tipping point. There's also the momentum that Israel has, having in its view, and frankly in mine, emerged pretty much victorious in the 12-day war with Iran. And perhaps Iran can be compelled to pull back on support for these proxy militias, and then Hamas would lose much of its backing. And if you look at all these factors, and basically the factor of time, maybe we've reached the end of the road.
So you think it's different this time around? On the question of whether or not Hamas remains in Gaza, we've heard Netanyahu repeat time and time again that there'll be no Hamas in a post-war Gaza. But what does he mean by that exactly when he says no Hamas? Is it Hamas, the military leadership of Hamas? Is it the political wings? Is it the civil affiliates of Hamas? Or anyone that he perceives as being ideologically allied to Hamas?
Well, in their ideal world, there would be no more jihadist, Islamist, rejectionists of Israel's right to exist among Palestinians. But that's sadly not realistic. I think what he means is that Hamas cannot continue to exist as either the government of Gaza or as an armed militia imposing terms essentially and terrorizing whatever is the alternative civilian government of Gaza. The Hezbollah scenario in Lebanon for the past several decades, if you will. I think that particular paradigm, Iran's proxy militias undermining the sovereignty of various countries in the region and of the PA, is something that Israel is completely fed up with. And frankly, I think the PA is fed up with, and so is Lebanon and, other countries as well.
Dan, thank you for sharing your views with us. Dan Perry joining us there from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for your time.